5.1. Solve inequalities using addition and subtraction. The graph of an inequality. On a number line, the graph of an inequality in one variable is a set of points that represent all solutions of an inequality. To graph an inequality in one variable, you use an open circle for a less than or greater than sign. So if I were to graph x less than 3, I can first mark 0 anywhere along the number line, and then since this is a less than sign, I can count 3 units to the right, 1, 2, 3, and mark an open circle and draw a line towards the left. And you will use a closed circle for a less than or equal sign or a greater than or equal sign. So if I have x greater than or equal to -1, I can first mark 0 anywhere on the number line and then count 1 unit to the left, and then I can draw my closed circle and then draw my line to the right. And for equivalent inequalities, just like equivalent equations, which are produced from properties of equality, you can use the properties of inequality to produce equivalent inequalities that have the same solutions. So here I'm going to show you the addition property of inequality. If A is greater than B, then A plus C is greater than B plus C. If A is less than B, then A plus C is also less than to B plus C. And this also applies to the greater than and equal and less than and equal signs. So I'm going to write this in. A plus C greater than or equal to B plus C, and A plus C is less than or equal to B plus C. And for the subtraction property of inequality, if A is greater than B, then A minus C is greater than B minus C. So it's just the opposite of the addition property of inequality. And if A is less than B, then A minus C is also less than to B minus C. If A is greater than or equal to B, then A minus C is greater than or equal to B minus C. And same thing for the last one. Okay, let's do some practice. Part A, write an inequality that is represented by the graph. First, you need to read the point, which is 36.5, and it's also closed. So it has to be either a greater than or equal sign or a less than or equal sign. And since it's opening towards the right, it must be a greater than or equal sign. So we need to put x greater than or equal to negative 36.5, and you can choose any variable. And for part B, solve the inequality graph your solution. Okay, so we have to use the properties of inequality. So here we will apply the addition property of inequality. You need to add 4.6. So then y will end up to be greater than or equal to 17.6. So you can go ahead and just choose a random point and write 17.6, and since it's a greater than sign, point the arrow towards the right. Now for the next problem, you are to write the verbal sentence as an inequality and then solve the inequality and graph your solution. So the sum of m and 14 is greater than or equal to negative 22. Now we need to use the subtraction property of inequality to simplify this, or to solve this inequality. Okay, so m will be greater than or equal to negative 36. Now I'm just going to pick a point on the number line and draw a closed circle because of this greater than or equal sign, and say this is the point 36. And since m is greater than or equal to negative 36, I need to draw the arrow towards the right. Okay, let's do one more guided practice problem related to geometry. Write and solve an inequality to find the possible values of x, and say this perimeter is less than 51.3 inches. So they give you 14.2 and 15.5 for two sides of the triangle. And we need to add that to x because we don't know x. And then we need to let this be less than to 51.3 since it tells us here. And now we need to find all the possible values of x. 14.2 plus 15.5 gives you 29.7. And then add x, let that be less than 51.3. And then use the subtraction property of inequality and subtract 29.7 to both sides of the inequality, and x will be less than to 21.6. And you must understand that we cannot have a negative value, so we need to cut right before 0 for all your possible values of x. So this should be your final answer in inches. Word problems. To get a grade of C in your course, C means 70% to 79%. You must average at least 75% on 4 exams. You have taken the first 3 exams and gotten scores 68, 78, and 81. What must you score on the last exam to get a C or better? So let x be the score on the last exam. And now we need to set up your inequality. So you can write 68 plus 78 plus 81 plus x. Since there are 4 scores, we need to divide by 4 because we're taking the average. And then we need to let that be greater than or equal to 75 because it needs to be at least. You need to make at least a 75. And 68 plus 78 plus 81 gives you 227. And then you can continue to write x, and then we can multiply 4 to both sides of the equation. So this cancels out. 75 times 4 is 300. And then we can go ahead and recopy the greater than and equal sign and solve for x. So x should be greater than or equal to 73. So you must score 73% or higher. A 4-member track team is trying to match or beat last year's winning time of 3 minutes and 41.1 seconds for a 1600-meter relay race. The table shows the 400-meter times for the first 3 athletes. Okay, part A. What are possible times that the last athlete can run 400 meters in order for the team to match or beat last year's time? So last year's time is 3 minutes and 41.1 seconds. We need to convert some values here. So 3 minutes, I would like to convert 3 minutes to seconds, which is 180 seconds. And I need to add that to 41.1, which is 221.1 seconds. Part A. What are the possible times that the last athlete can run 400 meters in order for the team to match or beat last year's time? So I need to let x equals the time for the last athlete. And then I need to take the sum of the first 3 athletes, 53.34 plus 56.38 plus 57.46. And I need to add it to x. And then let this be less than or equal to 221.1 because you want to beat last year's time. Okay, so now we need to find the sum of these first 3 athletes, which is 167.18. And then we need to add it to x again. Now we can solve this inequality, and x will be less than or equal to 53.92 seconds. So you can write at most 53.92 seconds. So the runner has to run 53.92 seconds to beat last year's time. So far this season, the last athlete's fastest 400-meter time is 53.18 seconds, and his average 400-meter time is 53.92 seconds. In this race, the last athlete expects to run faster than his slowest time this season. Is it possible for the team to meet its goal? Explain. So we need to analyze the situation here. The athlete's slowest time must be greater than 53.92 seconds, which is the average. Therefore, if his time is in between his slowest time and 53.92 seconds. The team will not meet its goal. So in other words, if the time for this last athlete is greater than 53.92 seconds, and also between his slowest time then they will fail to meet their goal. So basically they need to run a time that's 53.92 seconds or less. Okay, and this concludes our lesson.